Yo, what is up? It is your boy Zether back at it again with the finale or part 2 to What If Deku was Majin Buu's reincarnation, kind of like from Dragon Ball GT, as you guys saw from the last part. I mean, you had to have if you're on the second part. I wouldn't, know why you guys are here if you're not in you haven't seen the first part. But if you haven't, there will be an ad card at the top that you guys can click on to go to the first part of this video in case you haven't seen it. But with that being said, guys, on the last part, we pretty much ended up going over how Goku wished for, Majin Buu to get reincarnated, and he ended up getting reincarnated into the My Hero Academia universe as, well, Izuku Midoriya, or Deku. We had basically gone over how Deku's life would end up panning out from there, and we had ended up covering things such as, the UA entrance exam, the USJ, the heroes versus villains. We even ended up covering the sports festival, and we had basically left off right when they were picking their hero names as well as picking their agencies that they were going to be going with. On the last part, I had pretty much left it off by saying that Deku would have ended up picking the hero Fat Gum, and now we're just going to go ahead and get into that. So this is when Deku would end up packing his costume, and he would end up going to Fat Gum's agency, where he would meet a certain somebody by the name of Sun Eater. This person was very shy and he was so timid. He just seemed so weird, and he didn't really seem like he fit the heroic spotlight that most other people had. He kind of felt like a more shy version of Aizawa or something like that. That's kind of the feel that Deku was getting from this guy. As Deku would basically be reading the room, and this is when Fat Gum would come out of nowhere asking him, hey, glad you can make it. Well, as you can see, this is my agency. As Deku would begin to look around and say, wow, it's actually pretty nice. As Fat Gum would say, what would you expect? I mean, come on now. As this is when Deku would proceed to basically say, no, that's not what I meant. As Fat Gum would say, I'm kidding with you. As this is when, Deku would proceed to look towards him and say, so, what are we going to do? As Fat Gum would actually look at him, and he would basically close his eyes in the way that most anime characters do before they get into a fight. And he would begin to ask Deku to basically fight with him. As Deku would say, what? You want to just spar right off the bat? As Fat Gum would say, no, I want you to go all out. I want to see what I'm working with here. As he would basically walk him over to an empty room that he has. As Deku would say, are you sure about this? And Fat Gum would begin to laugh, saying, of course he is. As Deku would begin to say, all right then. As this is when he would begin to charge at him and punch him straight at the gut. As he would absorb the hit, and Deku would basically get ricocheted right off of him. As Deku would say, okay, two can play that game. As he would turn himself into a fat version to basically mimic Fat Gum's quirk. As this is when Fat Gum would say, what? You can copy my quirk? As Deku would say, no, I'm not copying it. I'm just basically changing the way that my body looks. And, that little thing where I basically went in and out, yeah, I can do that too. As Fat Gum would begin to basically say, hold on, so you can basically mimic my quirk without using my quirk? As Deku would say, it's a little more complicated than that, but I mean, I guess you could say that. As Fat Gum would say, that's actually extremely impressive. As Fat Gum would honestly not really have much to teach Deku. Deku would mostly just get to know what a hero is like, such as Fat Gum, and he would also get to know Sun Eater, or Tagamiki, I don't know his name. I have no clue what his name is. I know it starts with a T or something. But right, he would basically just get to know them and do a lot of hero work. He would do a whole lot of basically just patrolling with Fat Gum. And seeing as Fat Gum knows that Deku's ready, he would have had Deku, do a couple of things for him. As Deku would have actually stopped about 3 villains, actually very powerful ones, within an instant. He would have just aimed his 2 fingers and said, Boo make you go chocolate. Just kidding, he doesn't do that, but he's not the dumb version, but he would basically turn him into chocolate, and things would end before they could even start. So yeah, this is when we would now have, them all basically returning back to class, where news would actually come around that Ida actually ended up getting crippled by the hero killer Stain. After he tried to take him down on his own, Stain would have actually ended up showing Ida some mercy by not killing him, but simply stabbing him in the back and crippling him for life, to show him that he should have never tried to become a hero or done things for vengeance, as, well, Stain only acknowledges true heroes, and somebody like Ida doesn't deserve to be one, as he would have prevented him by stabbing him. And this is when everybody would begin to start, feeling sorry for Ida, as they would all basically visit him at the hospital. And this is when Deku would barge in the room saying, where is he? As everybody would point towards Ida's direction, and Deku would say, okay, so how are you feeling, Ida? As Ida would say, not not good, but it was my fault. As Deku would say, don't worry about it. I got you. As Ida would say, what do you mean you got me? As a pink light would start emanating from Deku's hands as he places his hand on top of Ida's head, and he would begin to heal Ida's entire body. His bone would begin to go back into place, and Ida would be feeling better than ever. As everybody in the class would say, what? You can heal people? As Deku would say, yeah, you didn't know that? As everybody would say, no, we didn't. And this is when All Might would basically barely walk in there to tell Ida that he's sorry for, what had happened. As he would see that Deku had just healed him. As he would proceed to walk up to Deku and ask him if he can meet him, after class. As Deku would say, of course, All Might. As this is when, they would basically, after the race, which is pretty boring considering the fact that Deku could just teleport, he would have ended up, winning at that. And in terms of, All Might, Deku would have ended up healing All Might, and All Might would have asked him why he never offered to heal him. As, Deku would say, well, you never asked. As All Might would say, what do you mean I never asked? I needed the healing. As Deku would say, sheesh, chill, I got you. As he would put his hand on All Might and heal All Might up real quick. As All Might would thank Deku and would begin to think to himself that he should have gave Deku one for all. I mean, he would have been unstoppable. An unstoppable force that nobody would have ever been able to take down. As, that's when they would basically have a couple of that happening. Now, after class, however, Deku would basically be walking home when Mina comes in out of nowhere and wraps him around in a sort of, binding cloth that they'd basically use for the exercise. As Deku would be dragged in by Mina, and she would proceed to tell him, how about we have some fun? And, they'd basically stay after class and do some studying while no one was there, They'd stay in the homeroom and they would begin to do a little bit of good old-fashioned studying. Now, this is when they would basically just be doing stuff like this for the next following week or so, as that's essentially all that they're going to be doing for the next, couple of days. Anyways, now, this is when we're now actually going to cut on over to, basically the days that they all get told that they're going to be having their finals. As leading up to the finals, seeing as Deku's extremely intelligent, he ends up tutoring Mina in both ways, if you get what I'm saying, if you get what I'm putting down. Now, they would both basically go in to take the final exam, and Deku would actually end up acing it, with the only real thing that I really have to cover during this arc being, the fight with Deku versus All Might. Now, this is when we would have the fight between Bakugo and Deku versus All Might. And Bakugo would rush in at All Might, basically trying to take him down by himself, trying to prove to himself that he isn't weak. Deku's way too powerful. Heck, he might even be more powerful than All Might, but if he can at least take All Might down, at least he'll know he wasn't a failure. As he would rush in there, and All Might would begin to do to him what he had done in canon, except worse. This time Deku would never interfere, and he would let Bakugo be taken down by All Might, seeing as he realizes that if he steps in, it's just going to make things worse for Bakugo. He's not going to yield, and he's not going to back down, as Deku would just decide that it's safer for him to kind of just let, Bakugo do his thing, and basically just, confront him or talk to him later. As, this is when we would then have a couple of little different things happening. And by little different things, I mean a lot of different things. Anyways, this is when Deku would proceed to basically step outside, as All Might would begin to look at him and say, oh god. And this is when All Might would begin to get flashbacks to when Deku basically mollywopped him on the last day of their training, as it would not be okay. Now, this is when we would now have Deku basically rushing at All Might, as he would punch All Might straight in the stomach, sending him hurling straight through 15 buildings, as All Might would stand up and say, I'm gonna be feeling that one for a week, as he would rush towards Deku and flick his fingers as he would create a wind pressure that doesn't do anything towards Deku, as Deku would begin to fly towards All Might, and All Might would begin to say, okay, this is not okay, as All Might would basically go to grab a little white flag that he has in his pocket, as before he can even do anything, Deku would say, and he would begin to mercilessly beat this man All Might, as by the end of it, All Might would say, good thing you can heal me, right? As Deku would maliciously stare at him, telling him, oh no, he's not going to heal him. As All Might would have like a sweat drop going down his face. As Deku would begin to say, just kidding. As All Might would say, whew, good. Thought you went evil on us for a second, Deku. As Deku would say, what? How could you ever think that? As, This is when we would now basically just skip on over to when they're basically told they're essentially just going to be doing the little forest training. And now this is when they're basically going to be on the bus. As everybody's talking about, how strong Deku is. And some of the people in the bus would basically be talking about whether they think Deku's stronger than All Might. Was All Might holding back in that fight, or is Deku just flat out stronger than the number one hero? As a couple of them would begin to see that there's no way that All Might was doing his best. I mean, All Might definitely would have taken him down. He was just holding back because, well, he had to. And honestly, that's what they'd like to believe. But deep down in everybody's minds, they knew that All Might wasn't holding back. And that Deku has long surpassed All Might. And this is when they would basically arrive, as they'd be told that they basically have to go all the way to the forest. As soon as Deku hears that, he would think that it's going to take them a while to arrive there as well. As Deku would look at Mina and ask her if she wants to take a quick just take a little bit of a relaxation break. As Mina would smile and Deku would grab onto her as he teleports straight over to the camp. As everybody would say, that is so unfair, as they would then have to fight against the monsters all by themselves. And the one who did the most work was Bakugo, seeing as he was trying to let his rage out on all of the monsters. And, we would then have Deku and Mina essentially just getting down to business. They'd be studying math, science, history, they'd be going to town, honestly. And this is when we would now have the teachers arrive. But by this time, Deku and Mina would have basically hid the evidence. And this is when Koda would arrive up to Deku, as he would say, "What are you doing here? You know you're just going to get yourself killed or something." As he would go in to punch Deku right in the BALLS. I'm saying it like that because I don't want to get demonetized. But anyways, as you guys all know what I mean. And this is when Deku would essentially feel no pain. The punch would have gone straight through Deku, and it would have basically broken Koda's hand, since he would have ricocheted right off of him, and it would have bent in a weird way. Essentially, not breaking it, but I guess you could say, voice crack, I guess you could say he would have basically sprained it a little bit. And this is when, Mandalay would come up to Koda, telling him that he needs to apologize, as he would begin to cry, saying that his arm feels hurt, he hurt his hand. As she would say that, that's kind of what you get for hitting him like that. As Deku would say not to worry about it, he could fix it. As he would heal Koda's hand, and Koda would look at him saying, "Wow, that's a cool quirk." As he would then remember that he sprained his arm because of him, and he would then give him a death stare, as he would walk away telling him that whatever, he's just going to be like every other hero anyways. As they would proceed to basically get their food cooked by Mandalay, and they would proceed to essentially go in the hot springs like in normal. Mineta would basically keep trying to peek, except this time when Deku saw that he was gonna go over there and get a peek on his woman, Mineta, you're screwed. As soon as Koda basically poked his head out and said, "Hey," Deku would have shot a chocolate beam at Mineta, and Mineta would have basically fallen onto the ground. As Deku would decide that what should he do with him. As this is when Koda would basically look to the other side, and he would fall. As Deku would catch Koda and say, "First time, huh?" As he would take him to Mandalay, and he would get explained about the situation with, the water hose heroes, as well as Muscular and all that stuff. But obviously they don't know it's Muscular. Now, this is when we would now have a couple of different things happening. At the nighttime, we're actually no. We're not going to actually skip on to the very next day, as Class 1B would actually arrive to the training joint, as they would basically be doing collab, training joints. As this is when they would basically begin to just train, together. And as soon as Deku sees the other class, he would think that, this might be fun. As Aizawa would tell him what he's going to basically train on, as Deku would say that he doesn't really need to train. As Aizawa would say, well, if you're not going to be training, then go train Class 1B or something. As Deku would proceed to go up there, and he would basically tell them all immediately. He would tell them all to fight him. Every single one of them. And they're not going to stop until the end of the day. No matter what. As Class 1B would get mollywopped for hours. Like, they would get mollywopped for 4 hours straight, and they would not be allowed to sit down or anything. The only break that they got was a quick 5-minute one, and that was just to eat a little snack and water. It was not okay. And, this is when we would now have Deku proceeding to basically whip them into shape. as a lot of the Class 1B would have actually gotten, they would have gotten what they deserved, and Monoma would have definitely, been the one who ended up getting the most character development after getting whooped from somebody, by somebody from Class 1A for that long. As this is when, the villains would arrive late at night, and Deku would still end up going with Koda basically after he left to basically check up on him. As the villain Muscular would still end up coming and trying to kill Koda, except this time, since Deku can, just defeat him easily, Deku would have decided that he's kind of bored, and that battle he had with Class 1B earlier, that really bored him, as he would decide that he's not going to use any tricks, nothing but his raw physical strength, as Muscular and Deku would get into a physical, brute strength brawl, as it's not okay. At first, Deku would basically be pacing himself, keeping up with Muscular, as Muscular would say, "What? How are you this powerful, kid? What's your quirk?" As about 5 minutes later, Deku would be so bored, he'd begin to yawn. And he would then tell Muscular that, alright, he's done with this. As he would basically end up punching Muscular into 3 mountains, as he would break through all 3 of them. And Muscular would be in critical condition, to say the least. Now, this is when Deku would essentially go into the forest looking for any of his other, classmates to basically go help them out. And this is when Deku would basically run into Tokiyami. As soon as Tokiyami or Dark Shadow sees Deku, he's terrified and he goes right back into Tokiyami as he's basically hiding. And Tokiyami's like, "What? Why?" As he would see Deku, and he would then understand why Dark Shadow hid so fast. As this is when they would basically run around and find Todoroki and Bakugo fighting against Moonfish, as they would end up helping him out, and Deku in one fell swoop would have knocked Moonfish out, shooting nothing but a small ki blast in his direction. As this is when Bakugo would actually get kidnapped before they can find Uraraka, or basically meet up with him. As Deku and the other classmates would have actually never noticed, and by this time, Mr. Compress would have definitely already been far gone with Bakugo and Dabi and the rest of the other people. As, this is when they would have basically been teleported away. And this is when we're now actually going to, be on when Uraraka tells them that, he's not there. As they would say, "What?" And they would basically run around trying to look for Bakugo, but they would realize the villains took him. As this is when Deku would get a little angry, but seeing as Bakugo's kind of a jerk to him, he doesn't really bother too much with him or even try to save him like in canon. Now we're going to switch over to the perspective of Bakugo. See, as soon as Bakugo would arrive, he would see a man with no mask. He wouldn't actually be wearing a mask, seeing as he was turned into an android. And he would basically have limitless energy. Yep, he's going to basically be as strong as Android 18. Now, this is when we would now proceed to essentially see All For One with his, his gold, I'd say white hair. Yeah, we're going to go with he has white hair. As Bakugo would say, "What do you want? What'd you bring me here for? Why me?" As All For One would say, listen, my child. You were made a fool. I've seen the way that you wanted to become stronger than that kid. And I have power. I can give you the strength you're searching for. As Bakugo would look towards All For One and say, "How do I know I can trust you?" As he would say, "Didn't you guys try to kill me before?" As All For One would say that was in the past. That maybe they should just let bygones be bygones. As this is when Bakugo would proceed to look towards him and hear out his offer. As All For One would begin to explain to Bakugo that before, he thought he was powerful. He thought that he knew what strength was. But now he can obliterate mountains with nothing but a finger. And after hearing that, Bakugo's eyes would widen, as he would think that maybe with this type of power, he can finally stand up to Izuku, and finally be stronger, better than him, as he would immediately agree to All For One's conditions to be his successor. As at this point, I bet you guys are probably wondering what other villains were there in the little forest thing. As instead of the normal heroes, there would actually be no Shigaraki there, since, Shigaraki and Kurogiri were taken away, so they would have actually ended up making a replica Kurogiri and basically cloned the Kurogiri Nomu that he already is, as they would have also ended up basically recruiting Stain, or All For One would have recruited Stain, actually, as, I moved my laptop really bad. Anyways, as Stain would have actually agreed to accept, seeing as their goals are sort of aligned at this point, as they would basically recruit Bakugo, and it's at this point that we're now going to switch on over to the perspective of Deku, as this is when we would now have Deku essentially just chilling in the hospital, watching his other friends there. As Mina would be safe and sound, seeing as Deku would have blitzed towards her, and he would have ended up saving her from any imminent danger that she would have been in at all. As this movie would now have, the thing where the heroes basically go over it and bust into the League of Villains organization. As yes, they are actually at the bar. And you guys might be wondering, why didn't Deku just teleport over there? Well, he has to be able to sense a signal or a key or something. And since these people are way too weak, he wouldn't be able to, find them. And since All For One does have, energy, but it's not key, it's just normal, potential. I don't know what the androids use. They have the limitless energy thing. That's what he uses. He doesn't use key, is basically what I'm getting at. Now, anyways, this is when we would now have basically the people in the class basically talking about maybe saving Bakugo. And Deku would basically tell them all that they shouldn't do that. The heroes are already on their way. And since Deku doesn't really like Bakugo, he decides that, he's not going to save him. All Might can handle it. As, we have a prime All Might. He's not weak at all, and there's nothing. As we would now have the situation with All Might and All For One going down. Except this time we would have a prime All Might. As soon as their fists clash, All For One would begin to basically... No, actually not. Let's go back. All Might would basically bust in through the building. And as soon as he does, saying, "We are here!" All For One basically begins to clap and chuckle. As he would basically stop Edgeshot from taking down any of his, his little villains, I guess you could say. As he would then proceed to basically teleport everybody except for Bakugo out of this area. As he would begin to look at All Might and tell him, "You've gotten even more powerful than the last time we met, All Might. Were you healed by any chance?" As, we would then have All Might there basically telling Bakugo to get behind him, as he can handle this. As Bakugo would give All Might a death stare, telling him that he's not going to go anywhere with them. He's joined the League of Villains, and he's going to make everybody in the hero course pay for the humiliation he had to go through. He's basically going through some Vegeta stuff, kind of like when Goku ended up fighting Majin Vegeta, and Bakugo would, basically have gotten turned more evil than he already is. Now, this is when we would then have All Might basically saying, "You corrupted my student?" Being angry, as All For One would begin to laugh and tell him that that's exactly the face he wanted to see on him, as he told him that his student was no longer his. As All Might and All For One would begin to clash fists. And this is when All For One would notice that All Might was way more powerful than before. As at first the clash would look even, and as time goes on, All For One would begin to show his true strength. As he would then proceed to look at All Might, telling him that if he thinks that this is the only power he can exert, he's far mistaken. He's grown beyond any level that he could have ever imagined. As he would begin to pretty much punch All Might straight through the stomach and crush a couple of his organs, as All Might would begin to cough out blood and say, "Baku, go!" As this woman would have All For One basically looking at All Might saying, "Oh Might, don't worry. I'll treat him right. He'll be my successor." As he would begin to look at All Might and tell him that your successor, he's next. As he would then crush All Might's head before Deku could even arrive on the scene. He wouldn't be able to teleport there quickly enough, and by the time that he got there, All For One would have been gone, as well as Bakugo. As it's at this point that Deku barely arrives, he would have flown there at maximum speed, as he would see All Might dying, as he would breathe his last breath and tell Deku to protect Mirio. As this is when Deku would rage, and a calm, rage would overflow him, as Deku would scream out to the heavens, with his pupils going dark black and his eyes going, with his pupils going red and his eyes going black, as we would then have Deku explode with rage, as everybody on the news would see as Deku's aura is just going crazy, and we would then have a scene with, the future number one and the previous number one hero, just standing there, as everybody would basically be saddened by the loss of All Might, but they would know that, but with this kid there, they have hope at least. as this is when everybody on the news would have actually seen as Bakugo basically turned to the dark side, as Mitsuki would be watching what ended up happening, and this is when she would be horrified by what her son had done. She would be terrified. Yeah, maybe he was a little rambunctious, but she never believed that he would do something like this, as this is when we would now have Bakugo and the League of Villains basically going off on their own, as Stain would actually be tasked with training Bakugo in hand-to-hand combat, and All For One would have ended up giving All For One more quirks to enhance his already powerful ability. He would give him a regeneration quirk and a healing and basically a pain tolerance quirk, which would make him far more durable, and they would proceed to do the androidification process on him, as at this point we would now have the next couple of internships happening with, the students. They would go back to class, they would meet Mirio, and seeing as Deku already knows him, he would have still ended up beating Mirio, seeing as he's way more powerful than him. And in terms of internships, Deku would have actually ended up choosing to go with Facum, seeing as, he's already met Tsunade, and he doesn't really see anything that Tsunade can teach him. As he would still go with Facum, seeing as he has a little bit of a liking towards him, and he would actually end up going with Kirishima, creating a bit of a friendship between the both of them. As in terms of the overhaul stuff with Eri, that entire situation would basically be handled by Mirio himself. See, I believe that a 50% one-for-all charge Mirio, as well as his permeation quirk, could definitely take down Overhaul. As soon as Overhaul would have basically taken off his gloves and scared Eri to running back, Mirio would have grabbed Eri, and he would have immediately permeated straight through Overhaul, so he would have punched him in the back, smashing it and destroying his ribcage, as Overhaul would have been taken down easily by a 50% charge, one-for-all Mirio. As now, this is when we would now actually have the gentle criminal stuff happening, and since there was no real need for the Overhaul arc to happen, they would basically just be having a sort of a raid to the Yakuza house. As for that, Deku would definitely actually be present, and everybody would basically just take down these villains as swiftly as possible. And since there's no Overhaul or no real, target, they would do this way more smoother, and there'd be less, canonic. There'd be less damage. There'd be less debris. All right, that's essentially what I'm trying to get at. Now, at this point, Bakugo's transformation into an android would almost be complete, as this is when we're now actually going to go to the Gentle arc, as that would not really matter. As soon as Gentle, appeared saying that he is the villain, Deku would have pointed a chocolate beam at him, and he would have turned him into chocolate, turning him into custody. And at this point, the villains would be training Bakugo after his, androidification process would have been taken care of. Bakugo would have ended up getting a bunch of other quirks, and his explosions would have actually turned blue, like cremation. His power would be multiplied, and he would have the same amount of power of All For One, if not more powerful. He's extremely, versatile, and at this point, Dr. Ujiko would have basically tried to make them as powerful and get them to the level of Deku. But, yeah. Now, this is when we would now have, basically a lot of normal things going by like a canon. See, after this point, they'd basically just carry on with their normal school stuff, going into the day of the Class 1A versus Class 1B joint training arc. And it's on this particular day, this is when we would hear an explosion at the UA front gate, as a bunch of villains, as well as the Liberation Army, would be there at the front gate, telling them that it's time for the heroes to fall, for this hero society to crumble down to the ground, and for Bakugo to finally gain his revenge over Izuku Midoriya, the one who had always wronged him ever since he can remember. As they would charge in there, and before anybody in 1A or anybody in, the UA high school could even, react, Deku would teleport everybody from there out of there as quickly as possible. Deku would basically link them all up, and he would proceed to teleport them all the way over to Shiketsu High, as it would be on the news that, the class UA high school would have basically been, broken into. As this is when we would now have Deku standing in front of every single villain that has been in the My Hero Academia universe. As Deku would be standing there in a badass way, kind of like Madara versus the Fourth Great Shinobi Alliance. As we would now have Deku essentially pulling some Madara stuff on the villains. He would rush on in there and use nothing but hand-to-hand combat to take most of them down, as well as shooting some ki blasts and chocolate beams at them. The first row that would have came at him, Deku would have immediately turned them into chocolate, and he would have ran around absorbing some of those stronger ones, taking the Ice Quirk from the Liberation Army and basically destroying Redestro. As by the end of everything, Bakugo and All For One would be standing in the back, basically congratulating Deku for what he had just done, telling him that those were just small fries. They could have done the same thing to them if they really wanted to. As Deku would look at them and he would begin to tell Bakugo why he joined the villains. I mean, sure, he wasn't always the greatest person, but that doesn't mean he had to become a villain. As Bakugo would begin to, go into a crazy laughter, as he would tell Deku that it's his fault. If he would have never been born, Bakugo would be the first. Bakugo would be the best. He would be the strongest. If it wasn't for you, Izuku, maybe I would still be at the top. But because of you, I was made a fool of in the sports festival. I was made a fool of ever since I was a kid. And I've always been in your shadow, but not anymore. As he would bullets over to Deku, and Deku would barely be able to see what had happened, as Bakugo would choke him by the neck, and he would begin to grab Deku, lifting him up. As Deku would turn himself into goo, and he would escape from Bakugo's grasp. As we would now have a battle between Bakugo and Deku going down, as All For One would begin to tell Bakugo that he wants to have the honors. As this is when we would now have Bakugo and All For One basically tag teaming Deku. As I'm gonna be honest with you guys, Deku was not trying his hardest, at least. He'd be putting about, let's say a good 20% of his effort into fighting these two. As, this technology is not half as strong as Dr. Jiro's. So their power level would be laughable, to say the least. Now, this is when Deku would actually stand up after getting hit, straight through the entirety of UA High School by a huge blast that All For One created. Deku would stand up with his clothes in tatters as he would laugh, saying that this is the best battle he's ever had, that he doesn't want it to end. As Deku would stare right at All For One, as All For One would, begin to chuckle, saying, "Why are you laughing, young man? You're in the presence of gods." As Deku would say, "No. You're in the presence of God." As he would proceed to charge up his aura to his maximum, going full power as he would flow into the sky, and his skin would begin to turn pink, covering him in a shiny pink aura that could basically send buildings flying for miles away. As we would then have Deku essentially staring down All For One, as he would then charge up right at All For One, and he would begin to have his pupils go black, his eyes go red, as his pupils would go red and his eyes would go black. I always mess that up. You basically have the Kid Buu look. As Deku would gain the characteristics of Kid Buu, and he would basically look exactly like him, just a little more human-like, I guess you could say. As this is when we would now have Deku basically standing in front of All For One, as Deku would grab All For One by his hair and lift him up at eye level, as Deku would shoot a mouth beam straight at All For One, as All For One would be no more. He would have obliterated him from the face of the earth and out of existence, as he would then turn his attention to Bakugo, as Bakugo would lunge at him using everything that he can, using every tactic that Stain would have taught him, using every single quirk he has at his disposal, but it wouldn't be enough. Deku would punch Bakugo straight into the ground, creating a 20-foot crater, as Bakugo would begin to punch the ground, saying, "Damn it! I still ain't strong enough. How? How are you always one step ahead of me? I can't catch up, damn it. I can't do anything to get to your level. And if I can't kill you myself, I'll just take you along with me," as he would point his hand straight towards the face of the earth. And before Bakugo could do a thing, Deku would point his hand straight at Bakugo's face, as he would say, "You're not doing a thing," blasting Bakugo out of existence, as Bakugo would be no more and he would be reduced to nothing but ash. as it would be on the news that Deku had obliterated All For One and Bakugo, these two godlike beings that the world has never seen before, as people from TVs all across the world would begin to cheer Deku's name, as Deku would begin to look up at the sky, seeing a couple of choppers flying overhead, as he would then decide that he might as well teleport all of his classmates back. As he would flick his fingers, as everybody would come right back to where they were, and Deku would begin to, basically go down on one knee, as he would say, "That took a lot out of me, As everybody would begin to run up to Deku, congratulating him, with Mina jumping on Deku, telling him that, she's proud of him and that, she's thankful that, she ended up doing everything on his own. As Deku would look at her, telling her that, yeah, it was a little harder to do than I thought, but, with enough, pushing, I was able to do it relatively easy. As she would proceed to say that he never ceases to impress her. As Deku would look towards her and say, oh, he's going to impress her a little bit later on. As she would begin to chuckle, and that's where we're going to be leaving it off, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed the finale to What If Deku Was Majin Buu, or What If Deku Was Majin Buu's reincarnation. If you guys did actually enjoy this series, which I actually had a lot of fun with, go ahead and leave a like down below. Also, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, as a large majority of you guys actually aren't subscribed, which is weird. If you're going to be watching my videos for free, the least you can do is subscribe. Come on now. Just hit that subscribe button, hit that post, notification bell, as well as leave a comment down below telling me what your favorite part of the video was and leaving some what if recommendations. I may or may not do them. I don't know. I've done a couple of what if suggestions. But with that being said, guys, you guys know the drill. It has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.